What starts as a peaceful winter getaway becomes a fight for survival when four friends discover that they're not alone in the woods. Something ancient and hungry is waiting just outside, and it's watching. The story begins with a panoramic description of the cabin. Located deep in Bear Creek, Colorado, it's surrounded by towering pines, heavy snowfall, and an eerie silence. Lisa, Mark, Rachel, and Evan, a group of childhood friends, arrive late on a Friday evening. They're excited about the weekend. No cell service, no distractions, just card games, movies, and laughter by the fire. The isolation feels refreshing, but there's an uneasiness about how far they are from any neighbors. On their second night, Mark steps outside for fresh air and notices footprints leading from the woods to their cabin. But they don't lead back. He brushes it off, assuming they belong to one of his friends. Later that night, Lisa is startled awake by a faint tapping sound on the window. When she looks out, all she sees is a dark outline of trees against the moonlight. But just before she turns away, she notices a shadow shift unnaturally, as if it's closer than the trees should allow. The next day, a sudden blizzard traps them inside. The power flickers off, and they're forced to rely on the fireplace for warmth. The tension begins to rise as Rachel swears she hears someone walking on the porch. But when Evan checks, there's no one there, just fresh snow piled on the steps. That evening, the group discovers strange scratches carved into the wooden doorframe. The marks seem deliberate, almost like symbols, and they're too large to belong to any animal. The following morning, Mark is missing. His coat and boots are gone, but his phone is left behind on the counter. When they turn it on, they find a photo in his gallery taken during the night, of the four of them sleeping. The angle suggests it was taken from the ceiling. Panic sets in as they realize the snowstorm has buried the car under several feet of snow. As they argue over what to do, the tapping sound returns, but louder and more insistent. When they investigate, they find the front door open, despite being locked just minutes earlier. Footprints lead inside. That night, Lisa notices movement on the roof and screams. As Evan and Rachel rush to her, they see a dark, humanoid figure crawling down the side of the cabin, its elongated limbs digging into the wood like claws. They barricade themselves in the bedroom, but the scratching noises grow louder, circling the walls and ceiling. Suddenly, a loud crash comes from the main room, followed by Mark's voice calling for help. Unable to resist the sound of their friend's voice, they unlock the door and run outside into the snowstorm. But as they step out, they see multiple shadowy figures moving between the trees, their eyes glowing like embers. Days later, rescuers find the cabin abandoned. The only clue is Lisa's journal, which ends with a single sentence: "We let it in." 4 expert climbers set out to conquer Alaska's Devil's Pass. They were prepared for the snow, the cold, and the danger, but nothing could prepare them for the terror that awaited them in the frozen wilderness. Jake, Mia, Carlos, and Heather are seasoned climbers with years of experience. They plan to document their journey on Devil's Pass, an infamous Alaskan trail with treacherous ice cliffs and unpredictable weather. Locals warn them about the trail's cursed reputation, but they dismiss it as folklore. The climb begins smoothly. They capture stunning footage of the snowy landscape, but on the second night, Jake hears faint singing outside their tents. When he investigates, there's no one there. The next morning, the group discovers strange symbols etched into the snow around their campsite. They assume it's a prank by another group, but no other hikers have been reported in the area. While crossing an icy ridge, Mia's climbing harness inexplicably snaps. She plummets into a crevasse, and although they lower a rope to rescue her, she doesn't respond. Suddenly, they hear her voice echoing up from the ice, begging for help. But the voice becomes distorted, repeating phrases in reverse. The group panics and retreats, leaving a marker to report her location later. That night, Carlos reviews drone footage and spots a shadowy figure standing at the edge of their camp. It doesn't move, but appears closer in each subsequent frame. The next day, Heather notices footprints circling their tent. They're barefoot and far too large for any human. Jake begins unraveling, insisting they're being followed. During a snowstorm, they lose sight of Carlos. When they find him, he's staring into the distance, whispering, "It's calling me." Carlos disappears that night. His belongings are left untouched, but his voice echoes through the snowstorm, calling for the others to follow. Jake and Heather, terrified and sleep-deprived, decide to descend immediately. As they descend, they see large humanoid shapes moving through the snow, matching their pace but never getting closer. Only Heather survives to tell the tale, found wandering in the snow weeks later. When search teams recover their abandoned gear, they find Carlos's jacket stuffed with pieces of Mia's broken harness and carvings in the trees that weren't there before. Anna and Ryan's winter retreat in a family cabin was meant to be a fresh start, but the bitter cold wasn't the only thing closing in. The shadows had waited decades for them to return. Anna and Ryan are a newlywed couple eager to escape the city. When Anna's grandfather passes away, she inherits his old, secluded cabin in Pine Hollow, Minnesota. Locals speak of a bad history tied to the cabin, people disappearing, strange lights in the woods, but Anna dismisses it as superstition. The couple arrives in the middle of a snowstorm. The cabin is old and creaky, with frozen windows and furniture covered in dust. They laugh it off, unpacking supplies and preparing to settle in for a cozy weekend. The strange occurrences begin on the first night. As they light a fire, the chimney emits a low, almost human moan. Ryan brushes it off, but Anna notices that the shadows from the flames don't move naturally. They seem to ripple against the walls, even when the fire stays still. At 3 a.m., Anna wakes up to a loud thud on the roof. Ryan dismisses it as snow falling off, but Anna can't shake the feeling that something heavy is pacing above. The next day, Anna decides to explore the attic while Ryan goes to collect firewood. She finds an old, weathered journal hidden behind a loose floorboard. It belonged to her grandfather, and the entries grow increasingly erratic over time. He describes hearing whispers from the woods and seeing figures at the edge of the tree line. One entry reads, "They wait for the snow to trap you. Then they come." Another chilling line states, "Don't leave the fire unattended." Ryan returns from collecting wood, pale and shaken. He tells Anna that he saw a figure standing between the trees, perfectly still. When he called out, it turned and vanished deeper into the forest without leaving footprints in the snow. That night, the couple hears soft scratching sounds at the windows. When they check, the snow beneath the glass is undisturbed, as though nothing had ever been there. As the snowstorm intensifies, the couple becomes trapped. The power goes out, and they're forced to rely on the fire for light and warmth. Anna becomes paranoid, insisting that the shadows in the room are moving closer when neither of them is looking. Ryan accuses her of letting the journal scare her, but then they hear it, a faint voice calling Ryan's name from outside. It sounds like Anna, even though she's sitting right next to him. That night, Anna wakes up to find Ryan gone. The front door is wide open, snow blowing in. She grabs a flashlight and ventures outside, calling his name. She finds Ryan standing in the middle of the woods, barefoot and staring at something in the distance. When she shines the light in front of him, she sees a towering figure resembling a shadowy stag, with glowing red eyes and antlers that seem to stretch into the treetops. Ryan doesn't respond to her screams, and the figure slowly turns its head toward her. Anna runs back to the cabin, locking the door behind her. The fire has gone out, plunging the room into darkness. She scrambles to relight it, but the shadows now seem to move on their own, slithering toward her. Suddenly the windows shatter, and the stag-like figure appears in the doorway. Its antlers scrape the ceiling as it steps inside. Anna collapses, screaming, as the screen fades to black. Days later, a search party finds the cabin abandoned. The snow inside has melted, as though something incredibly hot passed through. Anna is eventually found wandering miles away, muttering about the shadows and the stag. She has no memory of what happened, but every winter when the snow begins to fall, she hears Ryan's voice calling her name.